My name is Jim Grotta. I work at Memorial Hermann, as it's pointed out, in Houston, Texas. We implemented the first mobile stroke unit back in 2014, so it's now been a number of years. But my job today is to put this all in perspective, to give a start at why we have mobile stroke units and a little bit of background about stroke. So first, disclosures. I do have grant support, fortunately, and also Genentech provides the TPA for us on our mobile stroke unit as part of our clinical trial, which I'll just tell you that we just finished. I do also get consulting fees from Fraser, and I'm still blinded to the outcome of our data. And most importantly, I want to say that our mobile stroke unit is a group effort requiring a buy-in from our, as I'll talk about more later, from our fire department. Here's one of our medics. We have a medic on board all the time from the fire department, Stephanie Parker, who's our program manager, and the CT technologist, as well as local community involvement is critically important. This is one of our local business leaders who helped support our mobile stroke unit. And of course, I do have to disclose that despite everything, I'm a Houston Astros fan. Okay, what we're going to cover today is that the mobile stroke unit is all about delivering TPA faster and maybe someday TNK. But right now we've been using TPA, and the whole idea is to treat it fast, is to give it faster. And I want to emphasize that despite endovascular therapy, which also is important, obviously, for everybody on this call, as well as for our mobile stroke unit, TPA is not going to disappear as the most important treatment for and most common treatment for most strokes. But we need to do better, and the best way and the most efficient way to do better is to get the treatment in faster. And that's also true for reducing time for thrombectomy. And then finally, I want to touch a little bit about cost effectiveness. Well, why do I say that TPA is going to continue to be the most common treatment, and why we still need it and need to be able to speed our treatment? This is a frequency plot of the NIH stroke scale score of all stroke patients coming to the presenting to the emergency department. These pie graphs represent all the different positive studies, both with thrombolysis in the upper left, moving to thrombectomy. The point I want to make is, despite the fact we have very effective treatments, we're still left with over half of the patients in our trials left with disabilities. So we can do better. And as I pointed out, the best way to do that is by getting treatment in faster in the earlier time window. That's not to say we can't treat patients later. We can, but the percentage of patients with a favorable imaging profile is going to diminish as time goes on, whereas early on, virtually everybody has salvageable tissue. And I'll come back to the evidence for that in a few minutes. So mobile stroke units don't need to be fancy. That's one of the points I most want to make. Ours is a 12-foot standard fire department ambulance with a Ceratome on it. The Ceratome is on rails, and with this unit, we can still get very serviceable CT angios. The CT angio, unfortunately, doesn't get down to the bifurcation in most cases, but we can very readily see large artery occlusions. I will say that the Rapid CTA software helps me in getting to be more sure about more distal occlusions. When we get out into the M2, M3 area, it's very difficult, even with the hospital CT angio, for me to be certain. But certainly for M1s and distal carotids and proximal M2s, we have no trouble eyeballing it with our CT angio on mobile stroke unit. I want to point out that not everything with telemedicine on board is a mobile stroke unit. And people call these things different things: mobile ambulances, trucks, ambulances. They're mobile stroke units. And the reason they're mobile stroke units is we can do more than just identify a stroke on board. We can, as Dr. Noor pointed out, treat the patient. And if it's not a vehicle where you can actually treat the patient and carry out therapies, then it's not a mobile stroke unit. Now, how do we save time? These are data from our fire department, and as you can imagine, it takes a few minutes for the fire department usually to arrive on scene, and then evaluate the patient on scene, and then to transport the patient to the hospital. So that whole process from arrival on scene for the fire department to arrival in the hospital takes anywhere from 20 to 45 minutes. We are dispatched at the same time the fire department is, and our average on scene time is about 25 minutes. So during the time that the fire department would be transporting the patient, we're treating the patient. And so what we do is we save the entire door to needle time, which is in the United States now probably a little bit south of 60 minutes, but still approaches 60 minutes. And of course, we also save endovascular door to groin puncture time by the direct to endovascular pathways that Dr. Doerr pointed out. We don't have to rely on the RACE score. We don't have to rely on the LAM score. We have our vascular neurologist seeing the patient either in person or by telemedicine. And we've shown that we can shorten the door to puncture time by over an hour. If you're going to implement a mobile stroke unit though, and we've seen a number of these around the country, there are now over 30 of them in operation, but not all of them are successful. And the reason they're not successful is because they don't have adequate cooperation with the fire department. That is the first and most important step in getting a mobile stroke unit in operation. Is you have to get the cooperation of your fire department so that you can be dispatched at the same time the fire department ambulance is dispatched and can communicate with them en route. You also have to have collaboration from your other stroke centers. As soon as you start a mobile stroke unit in your hospital, your other competing hospitals are going to be threatened. And so the easiest thing to do is to deliver patients to all of your stroke centers. Every rising tide floats all ships. So we develop, in the Texas Medical Center, we have 4 or 5 comprehensive stroke centers, and we deliver patients to all 4 or 5 of them, have collaboration from all the directors of our stroke centers. The way it works is a 911 call comes in, and the Achilles heel of mobile stroke is the accuracy of dispatch. As Dr. Doerr pointed out, a lot of patients are dispatched as non-stroke, and they turn out to be strokes, or they're dispatched as strokes and they turn out to be non-strokes. So it's very important for us to communicate with the fire department in the field. Now, if a 911 call comes in and they say it's a stroke, fire department is dispatched, we're dispatched, we arrive on scene in collaboration and evaluate the patient with the fire department. But we also monitor the fire department radio. And so if we hear that a patient that's been dispatched as a fall or as a sick person, and we hear that it really is a stroke, we'll add ourselves onto the call and we'll rendezvous. And if the first responder identifies it's a stroke, if we can't get there in time for the fire department when they're ready to leave the scene, if they're well out in the community, we'll rendezvous with them halfway. And this allows us to cover 75% of the entire city of Houston. So ordinarily, if you just say, we're going to respond within 7 miles, you're only going to be able to cover a portion of the city. But if you're able to rendezvous, so let's say a patient's 20 miles away and they're coming down to the medical center, you can meet them halfway. So that extends our treatment area out to, on average, 13 miles. As a matter of fact, we'll meet them in a parking lot somewhere, jump into the ambulance, the fire department ambulance, see if it's really a stroke and somebody we can treat. If so, we'll transfer them into our mobile stroke unit. This doesn't delay things at all, and it enables us to cover 75% of the city. These are all the zip codes in the city of Houston, and a frequency diagram of how many patients we can treat. So you can see we can cover the majority of the city, which is over 2.5 million people. Dr. Noor has gone through this, but we arrive on scene. We quickly evaluate the patient. If they look like they're having a stroke that we can treat, we put them in our mobile stroke unit. Once they're in our mobile stroke unit, we transport them, and then the fire department goes on about their usual business. We get our CT scan immediately, and we make the TPA decision. We've evaluated whether doing this by telemedicine is as accurate, and it is. We've early in our trial, We had patients evaluated both in person and by telemedicine and showed that the telemedicine evaluation is just as accurate and can be done just as fast. I'm going to skip through this because Dr. Noor showed us some slides. It is true about patients. I'm not going to show you too many patient examples. We get about 5 or 6 alerts a day. This is an outdated slide, but we get about 5 or 6 alerts a day. About 10 out of every 25, or about 2/5 of them, will start off and the medics will arrive on scene and say, this is not a stroke, it's hypoglycemia, or it started 2 days ago, and we get disregarded, we just turn around. Another 2/5 will arrive on scene and realize that it's not a stroke, or it's not somebody we can treat, and we screen them out. So about only 1 out of 5 patients that we're alerted on do we transport. Now, of those we transport, we'll treat about 60% of those with TPA. So we treat about 2.5 patients per week, or close to about 150 a year on the mobile stroke unit. As far as outcomes, we're conducting a trial, a randomized trial, which is asking the question of whether our outcomes are better or not at 3 months, and also looking at cost effectiveness. We follow everybody for a full year. I'm happy to say that we completed enrollment of over 1,000 patients into that trial the end of last month. So we will have the data by November to answer at least the first specific aim. And sometime next year, after a whole year of follow-up, we'll be able to answer cost effectiveness. So hopefully we'll be able to present the results at the ISC. We have 7 sites in the country participating, including the UCLA site. I am still blinded to group 2 outcomes, but I can show you some group outcomes. This is combining both the mobile stroke unit group and the standard management group. So we have patients who are treated on the mobile stroke unit, and we also have patients who are treated by standard fire department in a randomized fashion. This shows you NIH stroke scale score improvement compared to time from symptom onset with TPA treatment. And you can see that almost all of the movement is here within the first hour or so. And what we've observed when we treat patients in the first hour or so, that actually that's where all the action is. And, even with large artery occlusions, the perception out there is that TPA doesn't work for large artery occlusions, but actually, if we treat patients within the first hour or so, probably 25 to 30% of them recanalize. So we can get recanalization in a substantial number of even LVO patients when we treat them in the first hour or so, and that's associated with clinical improvement. Again, group data, 21% of both mobile stroke unit and standard management patients are treated within the first hour, but most of these are probably mobile stroke unit patients because it's rare to treat somebody in the emergency room within the first hour. So probably about 30% of our mobile stroke unit patients we're treating within the first 60 minutes of symptom onset, something that can't be done in the emergency department. And as I pointed out, that's where the action is. That's where we're going to see reversal of almost all these smaller strokes and a substantial proportion of large artery strokes. And our door to groin puncture time is also substantially reduced. Earlier this year at the last stroke meeting, the Berlin group reported their data. It still has not been published. I've seen the data. I'm convinced that the data are accurate. I'm sure that the publication will come out soon. They have 3 mobile stroke units in Berlin. And what they found was that when the mobile stroke unit was available and patients were treated on the mobile stroke unit or were managed on the mobile stroke unit, by the way, not all these patients were treated. So there's a lot of noise in this where probably the results would be even better if they limited it just to TPA eligible patients, but they compared all patients transported on their mobile stroke unit to patients managed by the fire department, and there was a highly significant benefit for management on the mobile stroke unit. As Dr. Noor pointed out, if we these are data in terms of alert for endovascular patients to ED arrival time, on-scene time, before and after we started doing CT angio on board. The lighter blue is after we started doing CT angio on board. What you can see is that It didn't delay significantly our processes before getting to the hospital, but once we arrived to the emergency department, we saved a full hour in getting the patient into the endovascular suite if we did the CT angio on board the mobile stroke unit. This is a frequency diagram showing the same thing. So what about cost effectiveness? It costs, let's put a few dollars on this. It costs about $400,000 for the CT scanner. Then you got to pay for the ambulance and the telemedicine equipment and other equipment in the mobile stroke unit. Then you have to pay salaries. So it's about, you have to pay for the gas and all the other stuff. So it's about $3.5 million to build and operate a mobile stroke unit for 5 years. Well, that's about the same amount of money that your hospital pays for an MRI scanner. It costs $3.5 million to put a new MRI scanner in the hospital. So it's a lot of money, but in comparison to other things we do in the healthcare sector, it's not that huge a price tag. Now, the lifetime cost of a stroke is about $140,000. So if you do the math, and if you just reverse 5 more strokes per year back to normal, that's going to save $3.5 million to the healthcare system over 5 years. Now, we have to show this in our study, and that's going to take us a year follow-up to know. The Johns Hopkins group has modeled this, and they've shown that for every 1 full year of disability-free existence produced by the mobile stroke unit would cost $17,000, which is a highly cost-effective implementation. That means it costs $17,000 to give patients 1 more full year of disability-free life with a mobile stroke unit. As May pointed out, mobile stroke units also may be useful for treating intracerebral hemorrhage patients. We are about to start the fastest trial. Everyone knows that we've already tried factor 7A in stroke patients. It didn't work when given in a delayed fashion, but maybe in a mobile stroke unit, it can be administered more rapidly and we'll get a positive result. We'll see. We're about to start that study and enrolling patients in the next few months. So in conclusion, I think, we have effective stroke treatments, but speeding them is the best way to improve our outcomes. And I think MSUs in the pre-hospital arena and both for treating and triaging patients, is where we're going to achieve the best stroke outcomes.